be very familiar with as well. I know Andy has had a number of engagements with yourselves. So, yeah, Mark, as you pointed out, I suppose I'm the regional coordinator with LAWPRO for the Southwest region, but I suppose I've taken on some other responsibilities across the organisation, and one of them being, I suppose, this Catchment Community Fora Pilot, which I'll be speaking to you about tonight. I know Andy would have given you a presentation back, I think it was the end of August, Andy, just in terms of where it was at, and it was really just, I suppose, commencing that process, I suppose, then. So my presentation tonight will kind of, I suppose, I'll cover off a few areas, updates on where we're at and where it's going. So I'll touch on at the end then as well. I just have one slide, basically just updating you on I suppose, the funding programs and where we're at on that. Sort of hopefully, and again, look, I should hopefully be here about a half an hour, but as I said to Shireen at the start, don't feel free to stop me, because I'm not shy of talking, so jump in and stop me if I'm speaking too much. So look, thanks again for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. Some of you might know me maybe from before. I'm with LAWPRO for about a year and a half. I worked for over 20 years with the National Federation of Group Water Schemes as well. So I know I've met some of you maybe in my previous role there. So yeah, delighted to be here this evening. So I share my screen there now, and hopefully you'll be able to see. Yeah, that coming up okay? Perfect. Okay. So as I said, look, there's really, I suppose, really 5 elements to what I'll talk. Just to give a very quick recap. I know people are quite familiar with maybe the process, but just to touch on it briefly. I'll give you some developments, I suppose, the major developments since the last meeting. We'll touch on, I suppose, where we are right now, and then look into the future. And as I said, I'll give you those updates then in terms of the funding program. So just to recap briefly, obviously this pilot and the whole, I suppose, process of piloting Catchment Community Fora stems from the Water Action Plan 2024. It's quite a bit of work, I suppose, put into this concept pre the Water Action Plan publication in the various drafts, with many people probably on the call that would have been advocating it and calling for it. And I know on Forum Ishka would have been also one of the key advocators of this type of process. So in the final plan itself, there's 3, I suppose, main actions in the plan that I suppose details, I suppose, how the process was to unfold, and LAWPRO were assigned, I suppose, responsibility for delivering out on 3 actions that are kind of related to it. So the first one is just to examine ways in which further support can be provided for the formation of and capacity building of local forums to help identify and implement measures. There was another action in relation to facilitating public participation in the development of the catchment management work plans, which I'll touch on in the 5 pilot catchment areas. And then I suppose 6.16 is the public participation pilots will provide learnings on how agencies, local authorities, communities and landlords can work together and support action planning and project co-creation. So just a reminder for everybody, these are the 5 pilot catchment areas it refers to, I suppose, in the plan. And they're the 5 catchments that where these pilot catchment community foras have been established. So many of you will probably be familiar with, in 2024, there was an exercise that was undertaken and a series of consultations that were held in each of those pilot catchment areas with various groups that were active and at various stages of their evolution, I suppose, throughout the catchment. And following that exercise, quite an extensive exercise, full day workshop, there was a report that was published, or a scoping report that was published. And again, Andy probably went over this at the last meeting, so I'm not going to dwell on it too long, but there was a series of recommendations. These are just kind of summarizing them, but effectively that 5 pilots would be established in the 5 pilot catchment areas, and that the members of those would be recruited from obviously the workshop participants, but also would be opened up to any community group or any individual, I suppose, living or active within the catchment that was interested in becoming involved, that they'd have clear terms of reference, that they'd be supported by a host organisation like LAWPRO, and that we would establish an implementation advisory group to oversee that pilot process. There will be ongoing evaluation throughout it, and ultimately that process would inform a business case to and a framework for I suppose long-term funding and a rollout of this on a national scale. So that report was published in Q2 2025. And I suppose all of this is underpinning, and it's there to try and support the implementation of Article 14 Underwater Framework Directive, which is most of you are very familiar with, which is around public participation in river basin management planning. So I suppose very shortly after the publication of that report in July of 2025, an implementation advisory group was established that's set up of representatives from LAWPRO, from the Department of Housing, Local Planning and Local Government, and from Fora Mishka. And again, that group, I suppose, one of the first, I suppose, tasks that they had was to prepare I suppose an implementation plan. There was quite a bit of work had been done as part of the scoping exercise, so there was a very strong template that was there. It was tweaked, and again the group would have agreed and signed off on that. And that's the plan, I suppose, we've been following, I suppose, ever since that meeting in July. So it started really off in August with, I suppose, with sort of a kickoff and inception meetings. We basically did a series of promotional events and things like that to try and promote the formation. And then it was the establishment of the 5 pilots that was the next phase of the plan. Monitoring and evaluation is going on right through the whole process, and also the ongoing oversight, support and guidance to each of the forums that are established. So that was the plan that was set out. So since our last meeting, again, there's been quite a bit of activity. So I suppose the first thing to say is that we kicked off around that time with a fairly significant promotional campaign. And again, across the 5 pilot catchment areas. So most of you, I presume, are familiar. We were talking about the Boyne, the Slaney, the Malbay, the Nurifane, Light-D, who they've rechristened, they rebranded themselves as the Oriel Catchment Community Fora, and Galway based Southeast. So we would have started this process, I suppose, by trying to get the word out there locally. There would have been a national press release. There was regional press releases at the time. And again, we would have engaged in, I suppose, information campaigns within each of the catchments on our social media platform. But again, engaging with Fora Mishka as well and others to try and create awareness about, I suppose, firstly these information meetings about what the forum was, what the intention was, and try to encourage people to become involved. So there was very successful meetings, I'd have to say, had really well attended. I think the average attendance at these meetings was probably somewhere in the region of between 40 and 50 people. I think it was about 45, which was really good. I mean, we do, and I know you're familiar with, community engagement and public meetings can be really tricky and really hit and miss at times, but this was clearly one that people had an interest in, and we were delighted to see those kind of numbers. So the communications plan was largely delivered then across September and October. And I suppose after the meetings, these information meetings, the focus was on trying to encourage nominations, and get nominations forward. So there was a nomination forms that were established, one for groups that might want to nominate a representative to a fora, and the other was for individuals, again, just opening it up to the general public. Like if someone had just a genuine interest in water and wanted to become involved, that they'd have an opportunity to do it. So I suppose that this is just some graphics here in terms of this is for an example, say, of one. We would have the social media campaign we would have ran online, and we got very good traction online as a result of these. And there was one in each of the catchments, and as I said, it did result in bums on seats at the end of the day, which is what we wanted in terms of just again making sure people understood what it was, what we were trying to do, and what the purpose of it was. So again, just gives you a flavour for those kind of meetings there in each of the 5 pilot areas. So in November, it was really the focus turned to establishment, and we had kind of set a target in the implementation plan that we try and get all of these established before the end of the year. And in fact, we managed to achieve that, and it was actually most of them were all established before the end of November, would you believe? So I'm delighted that I'm here this evening, I suppose, kind of being able to say that we actually now have four catchment community foras established. And this is, I suppose, the dates of their establishment all happened in November, which was great to see. And again, so a lot of the nominations that would have come through that end of end of October, early November, and some would have even continued to come in right up till the end of the year. But the overall numbers vary across the catchments, and you can see there with I suppose the smallest numbers being I suppose in the Malbay, right up to the largest being the Galway Bay Southeast, at 24. So a really, I suppose, a mix straight away, which is probably a very positive thing from a pilot perspective initially, because you're getting learning straight away in terms of, how effective maybe a smaller grouping versus a larger grouping is going to be, and the learnings that come with that as well. So that's that was pretty much where so in total we have 89 members across the 5 pilot catchments, which is, again, I think we were quite happy with that. We thought it was a really good start. Just to give you a breakdown a little further, so what that looks like. So on those across those 89 members, 62 of them are there representing a group. So whether it be an environmental group, a tidy town, or something else like that. And 27 of them are there as individuals. And again, that's something that's really positive as well, to get that nice split and that nice mix. And we have a lovely mix, if you like, across the 5 pilots as well. In terms of the groups that are there, and not just the groups, some of the individuals, for example, are representing, if you like, a target group. So when the original scope and exercise was completed, 7 kind of target groups were identified, and we've managed to largely, I suppose, fill those across. And this is made up of not just the group representation, but also individuals. Because obviously, if I'm an individual and I'm a farmer, for example, I'm clearly there and I'm representing, agriculture. But I suppose we've left it up to them to define, shall we say, are they representing a particular target group, or are they there just as an individual? So you can see the spread. About 11 from sports and recreation. The other 9 is mixed up. It's kind of a mix of, maybe it's mostly coming from the individuals that didn't want to say one or the other, or maybe are multiple, if you like. We've just 2 from local business economy, which probably thought we might get more there, and we might still potentially. The large bulk of members are related to maybe environmental groups, and that's probably no big surprise, because we're talking about water here. We're talking about communities, so straight away communities that have an interest in water are going to be kind of generally those larger, or those type of NGOs. 5 from education, and I think again a nice split across the 5 pilots. And then in terms of community, 19, and I'd say the bulk of those are made up of tidy towns groups, funnily enough, with a few development associations and things like that as well. But by and large, it's those kind of tidy towns. And then for agriculture as well. So really, I think it's quite a solid, representation across those target sectors. So again, just a couple of photos. I don't have photos of them all here. That's just the Malbay catchment. This is the Slaney catchment down in the southeast. This is the Galway Bay Southeast as well. So again, you can see them there. They're all, I suppose, getting to know each other and trying to understand, I suppose, what they want to achieve, I suppose, through the pilot, what they want to get out of it themselves. So I suppose that kind of brings us up to pretty much, I suppose, the end of the year. And where we are right now is that, I suppose, since they've been established, they've been very active, particularly in the last quarter there. You can see, I think between the Boyne and the Galway Bay Southeast, they've actually had 5 engagements. Like originally in the pilot implementation plan, like we were suggesting, like at a very, very minimum, we were kind of saying we'd like to see them having at least 4 or 5 kind of formal engagements across the year. So it's great to see that they're really hitting the ground running, and there's a real interest there. And those engagements kind of mix from, maybe, as you can see, they've tried to give it a bit of a breakdown. So in terms of 3 formal meetings, and then the officers might come together once, and that's what happened in the Boyne, similar in Galway Bay Southeast. And then some of the other ones they've identified maybe some training needs that they want to deliver, so they held a specific workshop on training. We've had in the Slaney, they've had a mix of a formal meeting, a field trip, and a training course as well. So again, they're all kind of finding their own feet in slightly different ways. But a lot of I suppose the tasks that they've been trying to, I suppose, overcome in the first quarter has been around governance. So it's appointing the officers, so the chairpersons, the secretaries. Some of them have gone on to appoint, for example, vice roles, and also maybe communications officers and things like that. So it's really encouraging to see even the diversity of that. They're agreeing their terms of reference. So there was a template designed as part of the pilot. But again, it's left open to them to make any changes, amendments they want to, and the intention is to capture the learnings as part of that. Identification of areas of interest and priority. Obviously, people are there, they're trying to, this is why I'm here, this is what I want, I'm interested in, what I'm involved in. We're also trying to identify those training needs. So we've just actually issued a survey as well. It's only going out this week. But we've had a lot of discussions around training and training needs, for basic training needs, and I suppose for members, but maybe the more bespoke stuff for officers if needed. So as I said, it really is, they've had a really busy 3 months, I would say, in that getting to know you period, understanding the different personalities across the group, the different dynamics, and I suppose learning from that. So in terms of right now, I suppose we had a meeting this morning just with the senior community water officers within LAWPRO, just to we meet regularly just to review, I suppose, where each of the pilots are at. So that they really are, the focus right now is on development of the work plans. So they've kind of had that initial getting to know you phase, and this is what I'm interested in, and maybe trying to turn that into action now, I suppose, is the next phase. So it's getting getting what they want to achieve down on paper, I suppose. So again, our senior CWOs are really trying to help them with that. A lot of them are, as part of that process, they're kind of stakeholder mapping, within the catchment. So who's where, who are the other active groups, other active projects, maybe that's within the catchment. There's also been an introduction to the governance structures under the Water Framework Directive. So, for example, the regional operational committees, at a number of the Q1 meetings, the Catchment Community Foras were invited to come and attend, just and sit in and see how they work, how they operate. In one situation, we had CCF actually give a presentation. They were ready, if you like. They had their work plan kind of designed out, and the Malbay would have attended the Southwest regional operational committee and would have presented in front of the full range of implementing bodies, and it was a really positive experience. I was really impressed by them, I have to say. They hit the ground running, and they highlighted what the areas of concern that they would like to focus on, and they put the pressure on the implementing bodies around the table that they want to work with them, but they also want to see improvements, which was really, really good to see, and they were really well received. So we're hoping to see more of that as the process evolves. In terms of engaging with others, as I said, other projects that are happening, within those catchment areas, that's happening now. The trainees I mentioned earlier, and we actually pulled all of the officers together. This had been kind of discussed earlier in the year, and there was a request that they would really like a chairperson from one catchment would really love to meet a chair from the other, and vice and secretaries, etc. So we pulled them all together, and we just gave them a very brief overview, just made sure that they understood, I suppose, the pilot process, but not alone that they weren't on their own on this, that there are others there as part of that process as well. So it was very, very good engagement. So I suppose looking to the future, I suppose the first thing is it's really important that everybody understands, I suppose, LAWPRO's role in this, and we say this we said this at the engagements with the officers, and we said it at the engagements with at each of the forum meetings as well, is that LAWPRO are not there to direct each of the forums. We are there simply to guide, inform, support them. It's up to them to decide in terms of their work program, what their priority areas are going to be, what their priority actions they want to achieve. So I think it's just really important that everybody understands that we're there, as I kind of describe it. We're probably there in terms of even just very wide, broad guide rails, within the pilot realm, and up to the, I suppose, after that, then it's over to them. So as I said, we're hoping that over the course of the next month that it's really trying to finalize those work plans. Some of them have achieved that already, which is great to see. But I suppose there's a real impetus now, I feel, among the groups to start, commencing delivery. And again, we're there to provide that bit of support. We're hoping to have an engagement between each of the Catchment Community Foras with the EPA, and they're starting now over the next 5 to 6 weeks. We're doing basically it's a workshop session with the EPA around, they're in the process of developing a catchment management work plan tracker. And that's a big, I suppose it's the first time this has ever been done. And as the process is being built, it's just starting out. They're really keen to get the views of the members in terms of how it looks, feels, functionality, what it will do, the kind of information that we'll be able to take from it. So that process is starting. So really positive to see that the EPA are engaging in that, and I think that it's being well received, I think, by the members as well. So that process will continue into April. I suppose in terms of addressing those training needs, so as I said, the survey is going to identify what they are, and we'll try and address them as best we can, and we may reach out to others to help with that as well. And then again, in terms of facilitating that engagement, a big part of what when Andy would have presented the previous time was this: how are these forums going to interact with the governance structures that are there, under the Water Framework Directive? So again, getting these, making sure that each of the forums gets an opportunity to come to the regional operational committees, present on areas and topics that they want to bring to the attention of those implementing bodies. And there'll be a series of other, many of them are planning field trips and other kind of engagements. And I think one of the important things is that before the end of the year, hopefully in Q3 of this year, actually, we intend to start the evaluation process. Now, that process has already started in truth, because we're absolutely tracking everything that we're doing, from the time involvement in it to the meetings, the numbers of engagements, the I suppose the work plans, for example. Every element of this is being tracked because we wanted to inform the learnings as we move forward. So, but there will be a more formal evaluation process commencing and later this year, and that's being overseen by the Implementation Advisory Group as well. Fundamentally, the big message coming from these groups is they want to see action. That people now have kind of in that forming stage. They now want to see boots on the ground. They want to see action. And I suppose our message really to them is that what's people's perception of action? Some people see it as very hands-on, practical, doing something, getting out on the ground. Others see it more as it's things like it's engagement, it's working with others. And I think what we're trying to just again keep I suppose action is many things to many people, but it in a lot of cases for the forums, because they're not entities in themselves, like they're a collection and a group of entities, but it's meaningful action and engagement around things and working with others as well. So I think they're really starting to, I suppose, understand that and map that out for themselves, what that looks like. So again, as part of that, I suppose that work plan process, these are just the pilot objectives. Apart from the establishment and the evaluation piece, these three areas here in terms of the objectives that were set out, it's leaving it very open for them to trial various things, do things in different ways or whatever. So we're just trying to encourage that as part of the discussions, I suppose, in terms of their work plans as well. And hopefully we'll see that come to fruition, I suppose, as the work plans are finalized. So in terms of the evaluation, I just mentioned that there will be external expertise, and that was that message that came back kind of really loud and clear, I think, from some of the initial discussions, possibly even with this network, but I think also with Forum Ishka and others. So again, we're engaging an external consultant to work with us on that. Again, as I said, we're assisting with that data collection piece because we're just basically collecting everything that we can. I suppose the process of evaluation is going to involve a number of different things. It'll be a survey, a quite detailed survey among all the members. All those 89 will hopefully get an opportunity to feed into that. There'll be a facilitated workshop later in the year. We're really hoping to do that in person as part of maybe a national plenary type event. But again, that hasn't been decided yet, but that's the thoughts on it right now. And then there'll be a series of interviews then for people that are involved across the whole, I suppose, pilot process. And ultimately, all of this will inform a final report and the development of a framework for the potential future rollout of these across the country. And I think that's probably the main thing that most people probably want to see, capture the learnings from this and use that to inform the future rollout. So in terms of in addition to the evaluating the pilot itself, and this is something that I know yourselves would have suggested to us after that engagement in August with Andy, and Forum Ishka would have suggested the same, that I think there was a real feeling that we needed to, not just wait and for the pilot to be evaluated before we move on, that, we can be doing a lot of work in the background, and a scoping exercise to be undertaken in as soon as possible, I think was mooted. So we've very much actually brought that to the implementation advisory group, and they were very supportive of that. So we're hoping LAWPRO is going to lead out on that, and that'll be an exercise that'll happen this year, and it will happen during the Q2, Q3 is what our intention is. And again, we've just started that process now. We're just looking at the original scope and exercise that was done for the pilot catchment areas, but the focus of this one is primarily going to be around community activity. What communities or emerging catchments are showing a high level of activity that would be ready, if a fora was to be established there. Like some of you are on the call here, you're already quite active and have established kind of maybe foras or groupings within catchment areas. So it's building on that. But we are starting to see other catchments now emerging as well, that have there's a lot of interest, particularly where there are issues, around, for example, we mentioned at the top of the meeting, the Blackwater meeting that would have been held recently and the level of engagement there. But there are others like the Lough, for example, as well, that are showing interest in coming together. So I suppose we're just trying to capture that as part of this exercise, and hopefully have a list of catchments where there seems to be a real appetite for this. And I think that's really important to do that now, because that will really help inform I suppose the next cycle, which we're heading into really, really quickly, but could even advance, I suppose, in advance of that. If there's a willingness there and there's funding being made available, I don't see why that couldn't happen. And then I suppose ultimately that exercise will hopefully evolve in tandem with the rollout of the catchment management work planning trackers that is being created right now. So I think the two of those will go really well hand in hand, if you like. So that's probably as much as I had on the Catchment Community Fora. So I'll just very quickly turn to, I suppose, the funding programs. And I said I just have the one slide here, and appreciate, look, there's probably many of you on the call that are eagerly awaiting, I suppose, your letter from LAWPRO to see where this is at. Look, just to say that from the outset, I suppose we've had massive interest this year, the most we've ever had across all funding programs. And I'll take you through them now, maybe individually. So the Catchment Support Fund, firstly, we've received 66 applications and for seeking over €2 million. Now, we had provisionally sought a budget of 1 million. And that was an increase from last year, where we were at about, I think it was 850,000. Andy might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was somewhere in the region of that. So we sought an increase on it, but we got a whopping, €2 million worth of applications in. So obviously there was a lot of work to whittle those down and to try and, I suppose, focus in on, what are the priority, I suppose, groupings that have been there and have been established. But obviously we're trying to support emerging ones as well. That analysis and evaluation process has now been concluded, and there's 56 projects that have been proposed to be funded, and that's coming to a total of 1.1 million. Now we haven't released any letters yet, because unfortunately we are still awaiting budget sanction from the department for this. So I would like to, I suppose, I can apologize, I suppose, on behalf of LAWPRO. It's kind of out of our hands on this. Like we can't really allocate any funding until we have it in writing that we have budget sanction. So we're really putting the pressure on the department to try and, I suppose, let us know as soon as possible. I had hoped even in advance of this meeting I might be able to come to the meeting and be able to give you some good news, but I really don't think we're that far away. But I do understand the strain this is putting on groups. We're hearing it regularly through our networks, like that groups are waiting and are under pressure. The other thing that's really important to say on the Catchment Support Fund is, as you will see, 2 million ask, 1.1 million is what we're proposing to allocate. So there, I suppose, not everyone is going, obviously we have to work within the budget that's available to us. We have and are hopefully going to get an increase on what we had last year, but I do think that we have had to manage this, and we've had to, I suppose, limit. We haven't been able to give everybody everything that they looked for, and I think that's just a really important message I wanted to get across. So I think people will be disappointed, okay? And I hope not too disappointed. We've tried to be fair. We've done it as equitably and as fair as we possibly can. But we ultimately we can't allocate money we don't have. It's as simple as that. But I think all of this is really good in terms of informing future funding calls and business cases, etc., etc. So in terms of the Catchment Support Fund, sorry, the Community Water Development Fund, very similar here. We've received 142 applications seeking 2.8 million euro. So our budget last year, Andy, I think was 1 million on this. So this is really starting to grow, and it's brilliant to see. It's fantastic to see, but it just, unfortunately, when you don't have the funding to be able to match the need, that brings its own challenges. So we're proposing, out of the 142 projects there, we had to do a huge evaluation on this as well. And I should say, as part of the evaluation process, some of you are probably familiar, it's part of it is done externally as well. It's not just all LAWPRO analysing it, that, you know, we bring in an external evaluation panel, people from Fisheries and NPWS and the department that sit in on that panel as well. So we've whittled this down to about 92 proposed projects. Some of the projects, the smaller scale stuff, was maybe encouraged to go through our small scale and small events and projects fund. Others, there was maybe more suitable funding, other suitable funding programs. So we're trying to identify if there's other funding programs out there that people can utilize for the project. Well, then maybe it's best to channel, and we'll try and help and support them under those applications. But I think more importantly, in each project as well, we've looked at them specifically individually, and we've had to cut cloth to suit our measure here again. We've had to try and prioritize elements. So people that looked for funding to do a load of stuff, we've had to whittle that back to maybe we can only fund part of it here now, you know, and we've tried to align that part of it insofar as we can with the priorities, obviously the Water Action Plan and that are going to have best water quality outcomes. So the budget available here, we had sought from the department earlier, well, last year, it was 1.3 million. So again, we've had to refine quite significantly here. But again, that is an increase on what we had last year. We only had a budget of 1 million last year. So again, significant increase from where we were. So as I said, awaiting budget confirmation. We have the letters drafted, ready to go. We're just waiting for that green light. And then on the small events and the grants, conscious that was opened earlier in the year it was World Wetlands Day in February. Initially, we had to close it off then, obviously, because of just waiting for funding and budget sanction. But we are going to open it again. I think tomorrow it's going to be opened because World Water Day is coming up next week, and some groups are planning events and things around that. So we will hopefully be able to support groups in that space. So that's me. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope you took something away from it. Happy to answer any questions as best I can. And I've Andy here as well to maybe help me if there's anything I can't answer that he might be able to feed in on. So thanks very much.
Barry, that was really fantastic. Thank you. Really comprehensive update on the community fora.